Congratulations, you've made it to the final lesson, resiliency. All the other lessons were focused on the operation of your brain. In this lesson, we get to put it all together. What is resiliency? Resiliency is the ability to get yourself into an 80 thought process and hold it while everyone around you is trying to take you down. So this is really tough, a lot tougher than you might think, because humans physiologically sync up their thought processes. What happens is if you're at 80 and other people are at 160, they're going to want to bring you down to 160. You can try to bring them up to 80. And if neither of you move, they're probably going to go to 320 and take off. So really, this is what momentum is. I like to ask coaches, what's momentum? You talk about it, it's real, you feel it. They can't give an explanation. Momentum is when everybody on the team is in the same thought process. Now, resiliency is particularly tough for server house, which most of you are. You know, what you do is you like to move, to bond to people, to connect to people, and that does involve lowering your thought process. Hopefully, you now understand how to hold that thought process and how to help other people come up to you. The goal is for you to achieve resiliency by October 1st. If you do that, you should be able to make it through the year without losing any energy.
There was an elite branch in the military that was having high dropout rates due to exhaustion. However, these people were in peak physical condition. So what was the problem? Well, when they were taught these 4 things, they were no longer exhausted. How would you like to be an elite teacher, parent, or leader? It involved these 4 things. Number 1, focus. Open your nucleus basalis and pick a stimulus. This is the 80 thought process. Number 2, rehearse. The quickest way to lose your resiliency is to trigger. Hopefully you've figured out your triggers. That is the 320 thought process. Number 3, talk out loud. Your unconscious brain is the source of all your energy. If you isolate, if you don't talk out loud, you are going to get drained. If you talk out loud, your unconscious brain will juice you. This is what you've hopefully learned in the 160 thought process. And number 4, breathe. So let's talk about being an elite teacher. Being an elite teacher means that you are strong. Now, whenever there's chaos, whenever there's a tough issue, where do people go? If there was a tornado that broke out right now, all of us would go to the safest place. Or in other words, where we would go would be to the strongest place. So you as teachers, it's really your job to grow human beings. And no one can grow, no one can learn unless they feel safe. So the elite teachers are the safest. The elite teachers are the strongest.
One of the things that proves to me others don't have our model is when they talk about people who have issues. And the analogy I like to use is me driving a car out of the parking lot. My name's John. I get in my CRV and I skid when I leave the parking lot. Now, what would it look like if you were to refer to me as Skid from now on? I'm not Skid, I'm John. That was my behavior. What would it look like if you referred to me as CRV? I'm not CRV, that's my brain. I'm John. Likewise, people will call someone an abuser. They're not an abuser. If a person believes they are an abuser, then all they will ever be able to do is abuse others. An example for the brain is ADHD. What is ADHD? It's when a person directs their nucleus basalis at a stimulus, waits 3 to 5 seconds for a good emotion. If they don't get it, they find another stimulus. And they keep doing that, moving their nucleus basalis around until they find a stimulus that gives them a good jolt of energy. That's why people who have ADHD are able to focus on some things for long periods of time. Those are the things that gave them an immediate good emotion. Another example for the brain is PTSD. What is PTSD? PTSD occurs when someone experiences or witnesses a traumatic event. Basically, that traumatic event damaged their amygdala, their unconscious brain, and their conscious brain, which means that each area of damage has to be repaired in the specific fashion that we've shown you. Otherwise, if you only repair one or two of those areas, it will be like you didn't do anything at all.
There is a reason that women have a tendency to have a tough time sleeping. John said that they can have up to 5 squirrels at once. In order to sleep, you have to be down to one thought. The first piece of advice we give is to take a pen and a piece of paper and write down all of your thoughts before you go to sleep. So then you're down to one thought. Or number 2, think about all of the things that you're thinking about. Completely exhaust yourself for about 3 hours, and then when you're only able to hold one thought, you'll fall asleep. Another issue that women have a tendency to have is they can become overwhelmed, and so overwhelmed that they crash. This is especially true with the executive women that I coach. I will say to her, I have a guy that you can call every day and talk to for 10 to 15 minutes. And she'll give me this very skeptical look. And I say, here's what this guy's gonna do. He's gonna ask you what you are thinking. Now you can pick any of these 5 thoughts, and he's not gonna tell you what to do. He's not going to fix your problem. He's going to ask you questions until you file away what it is that you wanna do about that issue. Then he's gonna do it 2 more times. If a woman gets rid of 3 thoughts every day, she won't crash. And at that point, the executive woman will say to me, can I call him tonight?
There are no zero events to the brain. Everything you think and say and do either makes your brain healthy or unhealthy. So what I want to do is I want to give you some techniques to help you build a better brain. The first thing to realize is we are building our brain by the words and sentences we say, the words and sentences we think, and the words and sentences we hear. Which means if Ted says to me, you're an idiot, if I put that in my brain, that is not going to help me have a healthy brain. What I ought to do is I remember the communication guidelines and say, Ted thinks I'm an idiot. That's one way to protect your brain. Another way people are really damaging their brain without realizing it is when someone says something and they get an immediate negative emotion. What's happening? Again, if Ted says something to me, my squirrel goes to that tree and I have a choice. If I choose the branch that has a really bad emotion, I am going to feel that emotion ahead of being aware of the fact. So even though I'm the one who chose the emotion, what it's going to feel like to me is Ted says something and I immediately feel bad. So I'm going to say to Ted, you made me feel bad. He didn't. I did. Now what's going to happen? My monkey knows how my brain works, and my monkey's going to say, no, John, you chose that and make me feel worse. And that worse feeling is going to confirm to me, Ted made me feel bad. But actually, I'm damaging my brain. One of the ways to protect your brain is to realize nobody makes you feel anything. You are choosing the branch in your brain. Another way to become smarter is to realize the second step when you learn anything needs to go away from the tree you're on. So if I learn a new fact, the next thing I need to do is go away from the tree by teaching someone or think of an application. If somebody teaches me a fact and continues to teach me, they are actually making that branch smaller and they're making the emotion more negative. They're actually making me less intelligent. So if you've noticed, everything we've done in this course is to teach you a fact and give you a definition and then immediately try to show you an application. Every time you do something wrong, you have to do it perfectly 3 times to undo that neural circuit in your brain. So what if there's something I've been doing wrong 100 times? Do I need to do it perfectly 300 times to get it right? Actually, there's a brain hack. What you can do is you can rename the activity something else. Now you're creating a new tree. Next, you should do that activity as slowly as you need to do it perfectly. Once you do it perfectly, you can do it a little quicker, and then it will be set in your brain the right way. Now, when you go to do that original activity, if you think of this new word, you'll do it perfect every single time.
John just mentioned the way to build your brain. Here are 2 ways that your brain is going to be destroyed. When we are not at our best, it's either because we're choking or panicking. Choking is when you have too many conscious thoughts, which actually puts someone at 160. Panicking is like a 320 moment. Panicking is having no thoughts. It's very important not to confuse someone who's choking with someone who's panicking. The way to handle someone who's choking is to distract them with emotion. The way to handle someone who's panicking is to focus them without emotion. If you treat someone who's choking like they're panicking, you could actually cause them to panic. If you treat someone who's panicking like they're choking, then what's going to happen is they're likely to injure you or themselves.
Let's pull all this together and conclude it with some complicated applications. The first one is, if you remember back to the 320 lesson, we said there were 3 possible responses. You could walk away, ask for help, or you could ask a question. Now we see there's a 4th response. You can forgive. So something happens and you could just basically say out loud, I forgive them.
So a 160 application is isolation. When someone is in a 160 thought process, they are isolated. Remember, 80 is very face-to-face. It's very conscious. Someone who's in a 160 thought process is isolated. There was a friend of ours who was living in Seattle. He was an exhorter server, and he was working in a restaurant where he was the only person that spoke English. And he would call and basically say, I have no idea why I'm upset, but I am just freaking out at the end of the day. And there's nothing that he could point to. So John, you were actually the one that gave him the advice to every hour, write down what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And he came back and explained to you that he was actually upset.
Right. So what happened was, after 3 weeks, he called me up and said, this isn't working. I haven't been upset. And I'm like, he wanted to solve the problem. We had already, dissolved the problem, essentially. What happened was him saying what he thought or what he felt caused that squirrel to come to the ground and reset it. So after 6 hours of working, that squirrel would get to some pretty bad parts of his forest and he'd be upset. Every hour when he would say what he's thinking or feeling and write it down, it would reset the squirrel back, and it never had enough time to get to the bad part of the forest. An 80 example is intimidation. Basically what you're doing is you're getting what you want out of somebody. You're taking control of them. And the way you do it is to overwhelm them and put them in fear. So if you think about overwhelming them, throwing a lot of facts, throwing a lot of information at them, causes them to go from 80 to 160. And now that they're in 160, if you throw a couple of things at them that put them in fear, you can get them to 320. And that's how you get people to do what you want, through intimidation. So what you need to do is realize when someone's overwhelming you, you want to stay focused. You don't want to go after everything they're saying. People will start throwing a lot of facts, and if you stick to the main issue that you were talking about and let these things go, it's really hard for some people to let all these facts, even if people misstate facts at you, they can do that to try to get you to chase them, and now you're off the main point. Remember, there are no zero events to the brain. And what that means is your thought process is constantly going up or down. More importantly, if you're talking to somebody and their thought process didn't go up, yours went down. When I'm talking to somebody and they're at 160 and I can't get them to 80, I know my thought process went down.
And I think that you are incredibly intelligent, and I think that everyone here is recognizing, John as an inventor and a modeler and a scientist and an incredibly intelligent person. And I think it's really important to also note that when John has an interaction where his thought process goes down, he reaches out and he calls me. Why? Is because we can interact with each other and we can pull each other's thought process up. Because when John and I talk, we're both trying to help each other's thought process up.
Right.
So it's the same situation for me. It doesn't matter how smart you are or how strategic you are or how good you are with people. You're going to have interactions where people's thought process is not going to improve. So what you do is you go and reach out to someone, because isolation is never the answer. So you reach out to someone and they will help your thought process get better.
Right. So if you remember assignment 1, we said you're the average of the 5 people you interact with the most. We have a lot of people say to us, well, most of the people I interact with have a horrible thought process. What am I supposed to do about it? What you're supposed to do is whenever you interact with them, make sure you move their thought process up. If you do that, then yours can continue to go up. So you can interact with people who have a bad thought process as long as you're helping their thought process go up.
We really encourage you to watch all of these videos from the beginning. When you watch it again and again, what's going to happen is you're going to pick up more each time you watch it. John and I, we use the stuff that we've taught more as time goes on. We don't have it completely perfect without mistakes. We're constantly learning in each of the steps.
Right, and one of the things is now that we're at Resiliency, one of the things you may find is when you rewatch the earlier videos, you might get more information because you're less distracted. You might have spent time watching those videos and looking at things in the background or looking at different things we said or did instead of hearing the information. Hopefully now you're better able to focus and you're going to get more information. Really, the key is you learning how to defend your thought process from other people. A lot of what we taught in Resiliency is how to keep that 80 thought process, especially when people are trying to take you down. The final point I want to make is the real person you need to defend your thought process from is you. The biggest source of issues we all have is the 40 flip gap. We are not conscious that our intentions are not coming out in our behavior, but our unconscious is. And when we act out and judge other people, not being aware of that, we are setting up our unconscious to take us down. If you have friends and they have the permission to tell you that your behavior has changed, you are going to avoid a lot of issues that you cause yourself.